two things: where's the money, and how to sell it. So through all of my businesses, I've always been able to, historically find out, okay, where the opportunities are in that business. And there are many opportunities.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Harder Working Money podcast. It's an awesome day today, and we have a guy that I've been wanting to interview since I met him. He's a very cool dude, Paul Montelongo. When I first met him, I thought I need to get to know him more because he has a feeling about him that I feel like he's the real, genuine, honest, truthful, no BS kind of guy. And I'm super happy to have him on the podcast. So welcome, Paul.
Oh, thank you. That's a nice introduction. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Try not to disappoint.
The reason I'm so enamored by you or attracted to your backstory is because you have a business background. You were a successful business person that had multiple businesses, and then you transitioned to real estate. And that relates to me because that's sort of where I'm at as well. I spent 15 years being an entrepreneur, had 3 businesses, and now I'm looking to transition to real estate. So I seek out people like you to see how you did it and what attracted you to it, and was it scary when you first started out? So I guess a little backstory for the listeners of just how you went from being a business to making the dive into real estate full time.
Yes, I have a long business history. I started my first business when I was 27 years old. It was a remodeling, general contracting, home build, design build firm here in San Antonio, Texas, where I now live. I had worked for my father in his family, in the family business from the age of, from graduation of high school till about 27. And then the situation found me, I needed to be on my own. So I made the decision to jump off and be on my own. And I wouldn't say that I had the plan in my life to go out and be an entrepreneur and own my own businesses. It was a set of circumstances that drove me to that. In the first few years, obviously, like I think most businesses and most entrepreneurs, it was tough. It was very, very tough. And so because I had a family, I had a young family at the time. So this led me into custom remodeling. That then led me into a set of circumstances where I had clients now that were major insurance companies. And so I opened up a insurance restoration company. So if your house flooded or burned, or if your business flooded or burned, then it was my company that did the repairs. And I obtained those contracts through relationships with insurance companies.
That's easier to sell as well because you don't have to constantly be hunting for work. You lock in some contracts with insurance companies and keep them happy, and you have an easier flow. Yeah.
But I think back on it, like, how did I really get started? And the way I got started was a family friend had a house fire. He asked me to fix the house, so I did. And as I worked through the insurance company, I found that there was an opportunity there. So I bought a police scanner radio, and I put it on my desk. And
no way.
I listened to the police scanner, and I was an ambulance chaser. In this case, I was a fire truck chaser. And so I would hear about a fire through the police scanner. And I had a trailer with a bunch of materials on it too. What they do, what's called secure the project. So you secure it once it burns or floods or whatever. And so for the first probably year, I just chased fire trucks. So what that did was it gave me an opportunity to be first on site. And so I would build a rapport with the homeowner, the policy owner. And of course, I did a good service for the insurance company. I did a good service for the homeowner in securing their property. So that gave me a natural foot into the repairs and the renovations that came along with that. Eventually, I got rid of the police scanner because then I developed the relationships. Once I learned who to go talk to, I developed the relationships with the insurance companies. So, I did that. I did custom building. I have a long track record, a long history of custom building and projects and development and that sort of thing, mostly residential, some commercial. Then that led me into another business where I was invited to do speaking and training for home builders and for construction companies. and anyone related to the construction industry, insurance companies, electricians, trades associations, real estate companies, those kinds of. And so I spent 10 years on the professional speaking circuit where I did keynote speeches. I did sales training, marketing training, business development training. I wrote training manuals for the National Association of Home Builders. And to my knowledge, they still use those
Wow.
training manuals. Yep. But all along the way, I would do real estate. I would flip a house. I'd buy a house. I would renovate it. I would rent it, or I would buy a piece of land and turn it. So I bought a piece of raw land. I was going to build a house. I was going to sell that house, but 2 years later, I had not done anything with it, so I put it up for sale. I remember I bought it for $7,500. I sold it 2 years later for $15,000, so I doubled my money.
Nice.
And I did the thing that any 19-year-old boy should do with their money. I bought a truck and a motorcycle. Did not reinvest. But of course, a couple of years later, I bought a house and more real estate, and the house across the street needed to be flipped, and so I bought it, and so on and so forth. So
How did you finance those things in the beginning, like buying the house next door and things like that? Were you in a position where you could, or did you have to get creative to start out?
So when you have a construction company, obviously you have the personnel, and then at the time I had the cash flow. So I had the cash flow to be able to do that. Now, the entry point back then for a single family residence is not anywhere near the entry point now financially for that. So, and there was a lender. I had a lender that would participate in those kinds of things. But those were real simple transactions. I also did owner financing. So if I could find an owner that would, float the loan for a while, that was great. So that's the way I did that. And then in 2008, I moved away from Texas, or rather 2009, I moved away from Texas and I moved to Las Vegas, and I opened up a real estate training call center, phone room. And so we did real estate training and mentoring for people all across the country.
What drove you to do that? Just curious.
A business opportunity.
Just opportunity, and it sounded good.
It sounded great. So I got divorced in 2006. I got divorced from a long marriage. And so I was kind of...
Moved to Vegas, yeah.
I was kind of, just kind of wandering through life. The 2008 economic situation hit. I was trying to figure out, a lot of things. In life, if we want to go down that road, we can. I was at a place in my life where I needed to figure some things out. And so there was an opportunity, two things, to have a call center in Las Vegas and to do real estate on the West Coast, because at that time, the West Coast real estate was in a lot of trouble. And so you could find deals, you could find foreclosures, you could find pre-foreclosures. So Las Vegas seemed like a nice place to live and be able to still do West Coast investing. So I did that. And along the way there, I figured some things out in my life. And then I sold out of that, moved on. And I then bought a marina and RV park in 2015. So the way that story happens is someone just literally called me and they said, "Do you want to buy a marina?" And I said, "No."
How do you assess the value of a marina? Does it have rent? Like they lease it, just like a...
So here's the evolution of that. First of all, I said no. I never had owned a boat before. I still have never owned a boat. But one day I woke up and I had 115 boats. There were 115 boat slips. So in my mind, I reasoned this. I reasoned that each unit represented a check coming in. And so that was 115 checks. And then there were 23 or 24 RV spaces, and I got rid of all those, and I put in 38 tiny homes. I had 38 tiny homes built. And so there was another 38 checks. This particular place happened to be a membership club, so there's another 400 checks. And then it was also an events center, so there was another check every three times a month or so. And so it had all these multiple streams of there was a warehouse that had storage space in it, so there was another 10 or 11 checks. So you could see that right away. The way I reasoned on it was, okay, there's about 185 checks coming into my box each month. So that particular property at its height had 13 streams of revenue.
Wow.
From those different aspects.
Was it on a lake or on the ocean?
It was on the lake. It was on Lake Wiley in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
And so, but that was my first exposure to what you and I know now as syndication. So, although I did not know how to buy a marina, that at the time, let's see, I paid $2.6 million for it. I believe that was the number, 2.57 or 2.6, right in there. And it needed some rehab. I had no idea how to buy this. The reason I was invited was that I had business acumen. I had a track record in business. I had some net worth and I had some cash. So it seemed like I was being asked to help support the loan. Then we find out that the lender required that one of the owners, or that the owner, live in North Carolina. So I'd been living in Vegas. I was single. It was totally a good
You're
match.
the guy.
I'm the guy. So I went over there and I lived in North Carolina for a couple of years, stabilized the property. But back to the syndication part. So I had no idea about syndication or how you go collect. In this case, we needed a $1.4 million for CapEx and to close, etc. I had no clue. But one of the partners there had a clue and he knew exactly what to do. So he raised $1.4 million in 9 days. And I'm like, how in the heck did you do that? So I got mentored, I got taught firsthand. And so then he and I did another deal and then he brought in a friend, and that friend and I have done 4 deals, maybe 5. And so, now it just kind of continues. All this from my business experience, in that to my best count, I think I've hired and employed over 1,000 people in my career. And so I knew the management side. I knew the project management side. I certainly knew the construction side. I knew how to move people and projects and places and parts and pieces around to make a business work.
Yeah, and there's it's a business, and
It's a business.
A good 2/3 of business it's very similar. Like the parts
Absolutely.
and pieces are very similar at different avenues and different
Absolutely.
looks of those pieces, but it's still a business. It doesn't matter.
Still is.
There's money coming in and money going out, and there's management in between.
And there's people that have to pull it off. It's interesting you say that, though, because you and I, and probably many people that are listening to this podcast, we're in the apartment buying business. So we buy multifamily apartments. But I don't really look at it that way, and I've never looked at it that way. I look at it as I'm buying a business. Oh, by the way, the ground and the buildings are the asset that is attached to that business. But I'm buying your marketing, I'm buying your people, I'm buying your customers, I'm buying your invoicing, I'm buying your debt, I'm buying your vendors, I'm buying everything there is that you took to develop that business that you call an apartment complex. So now when I buy your business, I'm going to go in and convert your business or change it around to a business that I want, to a business that I want to run, to a business that I want to eventually sell or keep. I have the options. So to me, it is I'm in the mergers and acquisitions business. So I'm acquiring your business, all the good things that come along with it and all the not so good things that come along with it. And so, I don't know if we're going to get into any advice here, but if anybody is listening to this and they want some advice, I would advise you to view it as a business transaction. You're buying someone's baby.
And even myself, being in the business background, I had to get my head around not thinking of it like single family. First of all, even a single family rental, it's still mostly valued based on what the neighbor's house is worth and comps. This is valued just like a business. I just sold several businesses, and I'm looking at how we assess apartment complexes, and it's like I sold restaurants recently, and they assessed how much my flat tops and fryers and tables and what the name was worth and what the revenue is and what the profit margins were. They didn't really care what my tables were like. They wanted the condition of them, but that wasn't what they were buying. They were buying the income stream and the profit, and the assets just came along with it, and that's what allowed it to produce that income. And apartments, you really have to get your head around, because they're so expensive. The buildings, there's so much structure there. You think that the value would be attached to how much is that physical building worth, when it's really how much does it produce. And obviously, we have cap rates that people have heard about in the show, that the quality of, how old that building is, with, how much life it has left on it will change how much you pay. Just like a business will be, if it's a franchise, it's less likely to fail, it'll be valued higher. If it's a single mom and pop, you'll be valued lower. Every business has a way of ramping it up and down on its quality, I guess you would say. I sort of see cap rates a little bit as like the quality, or the classes of assets.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then when I learned that, remember when I told you about the Marina, multiple checks? Yeah. And then when I learned that you can have multiple streams of revenue coming in on an apartment complex, well, that sounded really good to me, because in all the business that I'd had in the past, think about this. I was operating a construction business, a remodeling business, and a insurance restoration business, and a speaking training business, all at the same time. Okay, so why?
Did you burn out?
Yeah, I did. That's a good question. I have not been asked that on a podcast. Thank you.
That's what happened to me recently. I hit 40 years old. I didn't have a midlife crisis. I had a midlife rebalancing, is what I'm calling it. And I was just like, I started all this stuff and did all this stuff when I was single, had no kids, and I just liked the work. And then I got older and more tired, and just, I had different priorities.
So your priorities change. I believe your priorities change. For men, it's my opinion.
And you get smarter too.
You get smarter. It's my opinion that in our 40s we have a reevaluation, and we can start thinking about our experience and our wisdom. Okay, how do we apply that to what we're doing? And that's how you overcome the overwhelm or the burnout, because the burnout comes from an expectation of yourself that is not sustainable.
No.
So you change the expectation. Instead of working hard, you're going to work smart. So instead of trying to do everything yourself, now you're going to work on your relationships with other people so that you can engage them in the process. And those are just some of the things that you learn with experience.
Yeah, experience. Like, I didn't have mentors. I was just at it alone, basically. And I learned from my iterations. My first company, it probably took me 6 years to figure out how I was actually supposed to be doing things in order to get clients, close them, who to trust, who not to trust for marketing and all these other aspects. Then the second iteration got a little better, but it was in a different industry. So I tried to trust some people, but then you learn, okay, who can I hand things off to and who can't I? By the third one, it was much easier, because I could take the last few iterations and go, I know exactly what I need to do and what I don't need to do. And it was probably the closest business I got to being an owner versus an operator. I made, one miscalculation, I would say, is I found an operator for me, and I didn't lock him down the way I could have, I guess you would say. I ended up selling the business to him, and I think that looking back, I probably would have partnered with him. I think he would have been happy with that. But next business, now I know. So got to just keep going.
Yeah, I think I go back to a point I made earlier. Like I didn't wake up as a teenager and have this drive and determination to be an entrepreneur. I do remember, and I didn't go to college. Okay, so I do remember going to one semester of the local community college, and I was taking architecture because I like, design and that sort of thing. And I don't know, we were maybe a month into it, and the teacher says, once you graduate and once you get your degree in design, engineering, or architecture design, you can make $40,000 a year. Keep that in mind. And I went home that evening and I said, that's not good enough. So I didn't go back the next day, and I never went back. I'm like 40,000. This was in the early 80s. Like, who the heck wants to work for 40,000 a year? Was my mindset way back then.
And that's not bad in the early 80s, isn't it?
No. I think that was probably a good annual wage. I don't regret not going to college. I think it put me into an environment where I had to be self-sustaining. But that was my one college event.
I made it through college. I didn't like it. I felt like they were just wasting my time most of the time. Like, I wanted it to be harder. I'd tell my professors, like, you need to make this twice as hard, because like, this is boring. And then I graduated. I worked for a great company with a great boss, with a great, leadership path and everything. And I made it 1 year, and I was just like, I just didn't like the 9 to 5 feel. I wanted to do it on my terms. I want to work really hard for 3-4 days straight, 12 hours a day, and then take a day off. I don't want to have to come in at 7 o'clock just to show my face.
You know what confirmation bias is, right? Confirmation bias. All right, so I have a belief, and I'm going to go out and search everything that I can to confirm my belief, my bias. So for a long time, I would do that with education, with higher education. I would say, oh, look, Bill Gates didn't finish. Oh, look, this guy didn't finish. Oh, look, this guy didn't finish. And so that was my own personal confirmation virus. Confirmation virus. How do you like that? Confirmation bias. Yeah.
Awesome. So you get into multifamily, but now you're doing, I saw recently you're building self-storage. So you're not limited just to multifamily. It seems like you more focus on multiple checks from one asset, basically. Whether it's that's why you pick self-storage, or is that the mindset?
That is the
behind
mindset.
It?
Multiple streams of revenue. And so a multi-unit property, a multi-unit asset, by definition, gives you multiple checks. So we know that you can do things to improve the value and appreciate the value of the asset so that you can sell it down the road for a lot of, for more money, a whole lot more money than you purchased it for. So yes, we are in the middle of developing a self-storage unit. We are about 90% finished with all the architectural drawings. We think that we will break dirt sometime this summer. We are approaching the city of San Antonio for permitting here in the next week or so. At this moment, it is about 550 units, and that's a little bit floating because we're trying to maximize the space. And I'm really encouraged by it and excited about it because it's new development. We're buying dirt, so. Yep. Everything from the dirt up has to be managed. Engineering, architecture, the drainage, the permitting.
Okay, I had to jump in here real quick. I hope you're loving this interview as much as I am. To get all our content and stay up to date, make sure you follow us on social media under Brian_O'Neill_investor on Facebook and Instagram. And also remember to follow this podcast if you're listening to an audio. And if you're on YouTube watching the video, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Okay, back to the interview. How do you assess where self-storage will work when you're doing new build? Like, what are the parameters in the area? Because if it's existing, you can look at its current trends and neighbors and things like that. How do you assess that you can build a 500-something unit and it's actually needed in the area?
Yeah, great question. So originally, we had intended to build apartments on this land. It's 8.67 acres. And then we got the idea that we need to hire someone to do a feasibility study. So we hired a professional to do a feasibility study. They took several months to do a couple of months to do a feasibility study, and it kept pointing towards self-storage because there was not enough self-storage in the area. Self-storage owners and operators have this whole dimension of measurables and information that they seek. Where is your property in comparison to other self-storage, the unit mix, the kinds of unit, air conditioned, non-air conditioned? There's a whole list of data that they look for.
And you use an advisor for that?
We did. We used a professional feasibility study company. In fact, we just met with them this morning because we're still tightening it up. So out of that feasibility study, we gathered a couple of critical things. Number one, self-storage is very, very desirable in this area that we have the land. And two, the more units I can get out of that property, the better. And so we started off with about 400, right at 400, and we're now approaching 550 to 600 units as we're trying to maximize the space because of the demand. So, it's a market study, it's a geographical study, we're looking at the influence of government, the municipal regulations. We do traffic studies, traffic flow studies. You study the utilities, what's out there, what are your barriers to entry. So all of those things are part of the formula to decide whether or not, or decide what kind of product you put on a piece of dirt you buy. We're doing it right. We're not doing anything half-ass. We're getting, we feel like we have the best engineer in town. We have the best architect in town for this kind of product. We have the best feasibility study company. We have the best builder. We're building a Class A, first-class product so that we have options, Brian.
Do you run it?
Oh, no. We'll hire first-class management, property management. We'll hire a first-class marketing company to market and promote it. So in these storage facilities, everything will be automated. The human resource need is low. You have somebody in the office that'll basically show you a unit, but everything beyond that, your lease, your payments, your entry, your access is all automated, which is the newest and greatest and best thing.
Does it sit under a national brand, or is it will be
Not
a brand
yet.
that's specific to you?
Not yet. So
Okay.
again, we have options. So the options here could be we build it, we keep it as a legacy product. So it's in our family forever. We could refinance it, pull out cash. We could refinance it and build a phase 2. We could sell it to a national brand. We could partner with a national brand. We could, tell me when to stop. We have options.
No, it's fine. Yeah. Okay. So you built to a spec that a national brand could acquire, or you could keep.
That's true.
Got it. Okay.
All a national brand would need to do is come in and put their logo and their colors.
Do national brands typically build, or they typically acquire from people like you who build them?
So what I'm told, and the research that I've done, indicates that they like an asset that is already built with room to build more. So you build your project, you prove the concept that it can get leased out, then you present your lease up plan and successful lease up plan to a national builder. They assume that, and then they buy the property. They buy the rest of your property, and so now they can add on because you already have a proven business concept. Is what I understand at this moment is the optimal way to sell your product to a national brand.
Sort of like their own value add version.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we're really pleased with this, and this will be my first self-storage project. I have built small retail, light retail in the past, and I was even actually an owner in a little tiny strip center in the past. But this will be a first big project like this.
How do you get investors to become part of it with you as it's your first one? Obviously, you have a record of success in other types of assets. Is that what you rely on, or is there any?
So the investors, the lending, the financing, these are all relationship based. These are all people that I have done business with, dealt with. And so, when I approached them and said, okay, we have this next thing coming, then since there's a element of trust there already, then that's an easier conversation. Will we syndicate it? I don't know. I don't know if we will. We may syndicate some of it. I just don't know that. We haven't got far enough along in our financing and in our business plan to know what our needs are financially. So I don't, to make it happen. So I don't know what we're going to do, but I could,
So you have that on the horizon. Is multifamily on hold? Is multifamily just waiting to pull the trigger here in the next few quarters? What's Paul's current news? It seems like it changes every week. I don't think the macroeconomics of what's going on is changing, but what's your 2023 plan in multifamily?
Yeah, I'm still very optimistic about multifamily. So I think over the next 12 to 18 months, there will be opportunities. We have recently submitted 5 LOIs on pretty nice size apartment complexes. A couple of them we're still negotiating with. We closed one in December. We closed one in January. We'll close another one on the 27th of this month. So we're still actively in multifamily. We're still actively buying and pursuing, and I'm still actively making offers. That said, we're much more prudent right now, and we're much more we're much more aware of what it takes to actually get the place under contract and then to perform and close on it. So it's a little different conversation right now with brokers and with sellers than it was, say, a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago, the conversation was very one-sided to the seller side. And the seller, through the broker, would basically say, here's what we want. You're either in or you're out. There was no negotiating. Now we're seeing a change. There's more of a balance structure. I would not say that it's a buyer's market, but I would say it's more balanced between buyer and seller, as evidenced by the negotiations, the contracts that the LOIs that we are putting in right now. I had a conversation with a brokerage, a representative from maybe the most famous brokerage firm in the country this morning. And I just told them, they had a group of things they wanted us to do. And I just said, that's not going to happen. And they're like, well, this is typical. I'm like, but we're not in typical times.
What's an example of one of those things? Do you mind sharing?
Not at all. Earnest money gone hard the first day.
Oh, even I know
so, well, now, but a year and a half ago, my most famous story is a year and a half ago, we put an offer in on a deal, and the whisper was $14.2 million, and I really wanted this apartment complex, so I put in an offer of $14.5 million. Well, there were 26 offers on this apartment complex. We came in sixth place, and the winner was $15 million with $1 million gone hard, non-refundable day one at the signing of PSA. So I couldn't participate in that back then. So now earnest money, non-refundable is connected to a series of events, financing included, financing being one of them. Along with the other obvious ones, the engineering and the phase one and clear title, those kinds of things that have always been there. But now we just and in our agreements we have event-driven release of earnest money. So when certain things happen, when the seller and the buyer perform certain things, then a section of the earnest money can go released. So that's one example right there.
What do you think is going to happen to those people that beat you on projects like that a year or two ago? Like, do you look back and you're glad that you held your line and didn't go and play at that level? Or did you not know at the time, you're just like, well, it's too rich for my blood, I'm out? Like, I'm always curious, the people that went to that level. At the time, everyone's doing it. Everyone's going harder and harder and tweaking numbers and getting crazy, weird financing going. And then there's certain people that didn't participate, and they're looking pretty smart right now. For some of them, at least the last year and a half, I guess you would say. Do you have any insight of like how you mentally were okay with, I know that this is where I'm going to be at?
I hope they do well. I really do.
Yeah.
Because it's good for the economy. It's good for our business. It's good for them. I would never wish them to fail. That just doesn't make any sense. That's bad karma.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's just my belief. I don't want you to fail at anything. I want you to be successful at everything. And having said that, I've got a set of parameters that I know I can deal with and I can manage. And especially if I'm going to go involve investors, there's a risk assessment there. So that's one of the things I think that is a trick in life, is to establish your boundaries, your parameters, your values, and stick to them. And don't regret that you stuck to them. It's just like, okay, that's who I am. Yes, I'm going to grow. Yes, I'm going to learn. Yes, I'm going to expand. And while I do all of that, there are some things that I just will not compromise on. It's not a hard line. It's not being stubborn. It's just I know where I am. So I don't know what happened to that property. That's just one example, by the way. There were bunches of them a year and a half to 2 years ago. I don't know where they are on that property, but man, I hope they did. I hope they killed it. I hope they crushed it, because it's a sweet property,
Yeah, and no one wants to see that happen, especially for the investors that are in it. Just trying to look back, someone that sat at 2012, looking back at 2007, trying to analyze was there a way to know, or how the people that acted a certain way came out of it better, and to put that into to learn from it. Like for me personally, like what is it that allowed you to go, no, that's my line, and someone else wasn't? What was the thought process? What was the thinking? And how can I learn from that? Because I'll be in that situation someday. And that's more where I was going at. So you've set it, and you're comfortable with your parameters, and you have to be okay with that, and then look forward.
Yeah, those parameters come from experience, and they come from just thinking about it, and they come from, all right, what's your level of tolerance for if things go wrong? So, one of my famous questions that I ask myself and others who care, and that is, what's the worst that can happen? So, okay, if you can handle the worst that can happen, then is it really the worst that can happen? But if you can't handle the worst that could happen, now you need to back up a step. So when something like that occurs, I will say to myself, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And can I handle that? Am I willing to handle that? Yeah, it's a interesting thing, like where we are right now. So we've observed in the past few months that investors are a little timid, and that's understandable. And there's a psychology out there also that there are people that are going to sit on the sideline and wait till the market either corrects or changes or stabilizes or whatever verbiage they want to use. What's interesting to me was that from 2010 to 2021, 22, there were another group of people out there that said, "Oh, I'm going to wait till the market corrects." So they watched it ride all the way up. And their psychology was, I'm going to wait till it corrects. I'm going to wait till it corrects. I'm going to wait till it corrects. And then there's a group of people now that are like, I'm going to wait till it corrects. I'm going to wait till it. Well, pick your path. What are you really waiting for? And those that are waiting, that's typically what they do. They wait. So you can be smart. You can be aware of what's going on in the market. But I've always found that the people that make things happen are the people that actually jump in and make a decision. Make a smart decision, but they do not delay making decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting to see within the Sumrock group, the people that they're closing deals, or at least they're attempting to go after some, and they're making the numbers work, and their underwriting isn't crazy. I mean, they find them, and they seem to be able to negotiate with sellers and get reasonable terms that makes the numbers work, and they're moving forward. And I'm just always curious, like, they're finding them, and there's a whole group of other people that are just like sitting on their hands over in the corner saying, "Oh no, we can't do anything right now," when they're not stretching it that thin, it seems like, on some of these underwritings that we're seeing. But it also seems like people with a little more experience, a little more level head with their parameters of how they function, and they weren't super aggressive to bite things up in 2020, 21, and they're just like slow and steady almost, it seems like. There's always opportunity. They just seem to always pivot and find it without getting aggressive.
Yeah, I would say one of my skills in business is two things: where's the money and how to sell it. So through all of my businesses, I've always been able to, historically find out, okay, where the opportunities are in that business. So let's use our example, multifamily. So where are the many opportunities to generate revenue, to make a property appreciate? And there are many opportunities. And so one of my skills is I'm able to find those, find out how to make those happen. And then the second skill set is how to sell it. Okay, so how do I sell it to the market in 3 or 4 years or 5 years? How do I sell it to you as an investor to come along with the ride with me? How do I sell it to a lender? How do I sell it to my partners, etc.? And I don't mean like snake oil salesman sell it. I just mean, like, how do I present it in such a way that the value is obvious, the opportunity is obvious, and that that it's good for you. So that's been a thing that I've been able to do through the course of my life and my businesses, and I see how it transcends and how it carries over into what we're doing now.
That's a very insightful analysis of kind of how you think things. Is there really is a different perspective from each one of those parties of what they're going to value and what they'll fear. And selling, like in my previous business, I just always think about, I did sales a lot of times, but I always consider myself just a consultant. Basically, I would come in and just listen to people and figure out what has value to them, what doesn't, what's their worry, how can I address it, and basically paint the picture for them. People have a hard time painting the picture. You can give them all the nuts and bolts, and they're like, we don't know what this does. You have to show them what the picture is. And
I think that's a better way to say it. It is. How can I paint the picture in a way that is influential? That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
how do you nurture that? I don't want to call it a mindset, but that abundance mentality and looking to see what you can control and what options there are out there is, I know you try to surround yourself with the right type of people. I've found that incredibly life-changing, just being around different types of people, where it's not a one-off person you kind of talk to and your brain can automatically go, well, he's the exception. In a room 150, 200, 500 people that are all thinking the same way, it changes things a lot. Is there any other way you do that? Or do you pick partners and people you're around in a certain way that match that mindset or that frame of mind?
Yes, I would say that the partners that we have a similar mindset of A, prosperity, and B, we're going to do whatever the heck it takes to get it done. So that, to me, that's real. To me, that's super important. Is, okay, can we all be in a foxhole together? And are we going to have each other's back? That's super important. I cannot underestimate that, because I've been in foxholes and not had my buddies there in the past. So now I choose to have, if I'm going to be in a foxhole, we're going to be in it together. That's my analogy.
Say, is that just a feeling that you have with people? I mean, that's not an analytical judgment. You can just go like, oh, I can check the boxes on this person. They're good for being in the foxhole. Like, is that just something you get over years and years of?
There's no Excel spreadsheet for that. It's a feeling, it's an intuition, and it's a development of a relationship. So, as I get to know you, and as I get to know who you are, and you get to know me, and we talk about shared experiences and where you came from, and you will eventually tell me how you responded to the things that happened to you. Here's some rocket science for you. People will tell you everything you need to know if you'll just listen. So the listening skill set needs to be there. And when the words that people use, they are real. And so some of it's intuition, I'm sure. Some of it's just experience and wisdom. And so that's how I arrive at that. The other thing is, I alluded a little bit to this earlier, and that is knowing yourself. So after a lot of people say they know themselves, and that's cool. I'm glad they do. But to really know yourself is to know your strengths and to know your weaknesses, to know the things that you won't tolerate, to know the things that will make you crazy, the things that you will respond negatively to. I think we all have triggers of some sort, and there are things that will trigger me and that will trigger others. And so if I can do what I can to not put myself in those situations, then I have a much better chance of having a nice, successful relationship. And Letitia and I, we made a conscious decision 1.5 years ago that we weren't going to do business with anybody that we couldn't go out and have a lot of fun with. Because I believe that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So if you work hard, you're going to play hard. You're going to fun hard. You're going to love hard. You're going to protect each other hard. So if you're extremely passionate in something, that typically transcends every area of your life. You're going to be and I appreciate people with passion. Sometimes I don't agree with people's passion is, but I do appreciate their level of passion. When somebody is truly passionate about something, that to me is an extremely attractive thing.
So I guess I'll close with just, as a successful entrepreneur, you have properties. I'm sure you could retire. Why keep going? I'm sure it's just because you enjoy it as well. But with success as an entrepreneur, how do you have contentment in your current situation? Because, I'm out doing this and I have this coming and I have that. And I ask this as a completely selfish question, because I catch myself, and actually my wife catches me sometimes, always thinking about the future and forward and what's next, and feeling like I haven't succeeded yet because I haven't completed this new venture, and sort of forgetting like all this stuff behind me that is pretty substantial. I'll go through and pick out the things I didn't do well on them, but it actually takes her sometimes to sit down and go, don't forget X, Y, and Z. It's like, oh yeah. How do you sit back and be content where you're at and not let the future cloud that? I'm not asking that question well or not, but
I understand what you're asking. And by the way, your wife is very wise.
she is. She's a good balance to me.
To be able to give you that advice. You know, I told you the story about the Marina that came into my life, and that came into my life at a point where I essentially was retired. I was not working. I had sold out of businesses and 2 businesses, and so I was basically not working. I was just piddling here and there, and that came to me as an opportunity for me to get re-engaged and use my skills. And it was a new venture. It was a new frontier. So I think the trick is this: new frontiers. If you're looking for new frontiers, you will stay engaged and you'll stay passionate and you will not get complacent. And a deep sense of gratitude for where you are and a deep sense of gratitude for what took you there. I established a belief several years ago that everything that had happened to me in my life up to today has prepared me for whatever is happening today. So all of those businesses and all those people I hired and all those failures and all those successes and all those whatever that happened all those 35 years, they prepared me to go out and buy that first multifamily property. And now that I've done that a bunch of times, that prepares me for whatever is next. And then when I'm done with that, that'll prepare me for whatever's next. So that's a belief that I established years ago. And the other belief was, I think when I was I was in my mid-40s, I just realized, okay, this is all a journey. Now, fortunately, there are people out there that realize this much earlier in life. But for me, it was about that age. I'm like, okay, this is all an experiment. This is my life's experiment. And so what am I going to learn from it? What joys am I going to get? And listen, I get as frustrated as the next person when something doesn't happen and doesn't happen properly or doesn't happen on my timeline that I thought. I get as frustrated as the next person, maybe more so, because people like you, we demand a lot of ourselves, right? We demand a lot. So when we don't see those things happen immediately, we can get as hard upon ourselves as anybody. And at the end of the day, if we can keep that in perspective, and if I can keep that in perspective in terms of, okay, I have a beautiful family, I have a really nice dwelling, I have great friends, and so, those things are in perspective. We can choose to do anything and pretty much go anywhere that we wish. So that's a real blessing, and to keep that in mind and in the forefront of our minds is really where I think the trick is.
That's amazing. I don't think I could say that in 100 tries if I could. You remind me a lot. I don't know if you know him, Dean Graciosi. He has similar,
I do know Dean.
Similar advice, and living with gratitude, he says, is one of the biggest things that has affected his life. And I started doing a daily gratitude journal that just pops up on my phone. And in the beginning, it was sort of just the same stuff over and over. And then you start to think, like, I have a nice house that I don't have to worry about the payment. And I have family that I can rely on if I need something. And where I'm at now compared to where I was, like, we're fine. Like, we are great. It is great right now. Like, yes, it will be better someday, but it's so there's something about the human brain. You have to train it to constantly look at where you act. What's the reality of right now? Reality right now is things are amazing.
And from a spiritual perspective, Buddhism teaches that there's suffering in attachment. So if I'm attached to the things and I fear the loss of those things, even if I fear the loss of relationships, or I fear the loss of family, or I fear the loss of life, if I am in serious fear of those things and I am attached to the outcome of that loss. And so it's that attachment that creates that angst and that suffering and that discontent. And so, I mean, listen, I'm not anything special. I've had plenty of hurt in my life. Okay. But it's all been a lesson. Remember, I told you everything led me up to now. So all of that, all of that counts. So from a spiritual perspective, we were placed here, and I don't know how you believe spiritually, but I believe that I was placed here to squeeze everything out of this existence. And then what happens to me next, maybe I'll get another try, a different try.
Well, from my limited time I've known you, I definitely think you are squeezing a lot out of this life that you've created for yourself. So let's wrap it up on that. I can't think of a better ending than that. Paul, if people want to get in contact with you, we'll put everything in the show notes. Paul has a bunch of content out there as well on YouTube that I stumbled upon that we want to put in show notes as well. Is there anything else you want to throw out there, Paul? Email addresses, websites? What's your current company website?
It'd be paulmontelongo.com. And every social media outlet is at Paul Montelongo. I make myself available to mentor and to teach and to guide and offer advice. I just feel like it's the right thing to do. I've had people guide me, and so I just feel like it's the right thing. So anybody out there have any special circumstances that could use a word of encouragement? I still have friends. I have friends that I call up and I go, "Hey, I need a word of encouragement. Can you? I need to run something by you." So I make myself available for that. But anything at Paul Montelongo, and I am pretty darn good about eventually responding.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, thank you, Paul, for coming on and giving us an hour of your time. It was a very insightful little deep dive into your world and your thought process. So I appreciate all your time.
Appreciate the offer.
Problem.